Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of WordPress Theme Development from scratch. In the previous video, we had got all of the packages installed which were required for the WordPress setup for bundling all of our components and converting them into JavaScript that most browsers can understand. So I'm going to just go ahead and close this, and we'll move on to the source directory, which is where we'll keep our blocks as well as the components. We'll start with our component. What we want to do is first we'll set up our directory structure where we're going to keep all the files. Then we're going to go ahead and extend the webpack config of the WordPress scripts that we are using for this particular package. As you can see, we've installed WordPress scripts, which is a core package for bundling. So let's go ahead and do that. So we are currently under Aquila, and then under source, we'll create a new directory called components. So what we're going to do is we'll build components like maybe a grid or a section or a button or an image, so that we can reuse these components when we are building our themes. This is pretty useful when you have a design and a component is reused into a bigger component. So for modularity, this is the best way of development. So let's say I'm going to create a component. Let's say we name it as grid. Okay, so we'll create a directory, and inside this we'll keep all the related files. So we'll keep the index file where we'll keep a JavaScript index.js. You can also do index.ts. We'll provide TypeScript support also, but for now I'm doing index.js. Then you have the index.php where you'll keep the HTML and PHP. Index.php, and then you will have index.scss because we're going to use Sass. Okay, and we are going to, this is what we have. And then I'm just going to go to our repo, which is this one, WordPress example. Make sure you are into the add WordPress script branch, and then go to themes, Aquila, then source, then components. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy the grid component. I'll explain to you what all is happening here in a moment. Right now we are focusing on setting up the build process, so I'm not going to spend too much time wrong place. Spend too much time into explaining everything here. We will come back to that, but this component is basically just a container. Here we'll pass the content, and the way we're doing things is that this component is going to accept the props, like how you do it in Laravel Blade, where you pass the props and then component accepts the data, and based on that it renders a different data, but the style remains the same. So usually a component is responsible for just the markup, the styles, and if there is any JavaScript functionality. So markup stays here in the PHP file, styles stay here in the index.scss, and JavaScript stays inside of the index.js. And component are usually, I would say, dumb. Like, we shouldn't be putting logics over here apart from rendering different props and different classes based on the props that we are passed. That's the only logic you should stay over here, but we should keep the logic outside of the component. The component should be as dumb as just give it a data, and it should render that data in the style or layout that we have defined in this component, right? So you have this some wrapper attributes, some classes that we're going on, and we have some props that we are passing, like gap, column count, content, wrapper attribute, etc. And then you have certain documentation. And why you're seeing a lot of documentation here is because in a moment, not on this call probably, but in another call, we'll go ahead and use a plugin we call Component Viewer, which will be a custom WordPress plugin and the job of which will be basically to show these components in the WordPress backend component viewer page, so that when the front-end developers are building components, they can build in isolation and they don't have to be dependent on the backend developers to basically wait for the data. You know, they can just create props. So when the backend work is done, they're just going to use these components either on the page template or in the blocks. Okay. So I'll go over this later on. But for now, you can just think about it. These are basically some documentations, and the component viewer plugin is going to pick up all of this information and show it on the front end. It's just like Storybook. You know, you've seen Storybook, right? If not, you can Google it. Storybook allows you to basically show each of the component in isolation, so you can work on them. Okay. So we have got that, and then I'm also going to make sure it has everything we need. So let's see, we have item.php. This is a sub component because sometimes if a component is big, you know, you may want to create sub components. So this is the grid items. I'm just going to place that here and make sure the main file is always the index.php, but you can have multiple sub components inside that. Okay, cool. And then make sure you import this index.scss file. So some styles here. In fact, we can just copy the styles, that's fine. Styles here. Oh, it's just pulling up from there, okay. Okay. Oh, since we are pulling up the styles from SCSS, we can actually create the SAS folder also. This is where we'll keep all the SAS files. So inside of the source, but a different folder altogether, where we'll keep all our global stuff. So create the SCSS. Okay, and then inside that we can have a main.css, main.scss, sorry, and then we can have one for grid. So this one's gonna have all the grid related stuff. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time in basically literally writing the CSS. You can imagine how much time it's going to consume if I start doing that, like line by line. If I'm writing code, this will take ages to finish this series. It's basically just to show you how to build the theme development, how to do the theme development. I'm sure, but you must already know how to do styling, right? So you have the grid. Oops, I think I pasted the wrong place. Yeah, so let's do grid. So we can do underscore grid. This is where we'll keep our grid related styles. Okay, so you have basically the grid related style. You have some mixins. So let's get our mixins. Keeping the CSS to a minimum. You have our mixins. Underscore mixins mixins.scss. Okay, we've got our mixins there, and then you have the placeholders. So I'm going to create the placeholder file. Underscore placeholders dot scss. Okay, and then you'll have variables. So this is basically where you'll define your breakpoints. Variables. Okay, and let's see what else is there. mixins, placeholders. Yeah, I think we've got pretty much. And then in the main.scss we need to import the grid. Okay, so these are variables, these are placeholders, some of the values of the placeholders that you see over here. By the way, these are going to come from the theme.json file, these custom presets that WordPress already creates when you define them in the theme.json, but I've just placed them here and we'll go over these when we do theme.json. Okay, and then these are some of your mixins for grid columns, and line clamp. And then you have this grid.scss file where you have your mixins, you have different columns layout, and then at different screen sizes, you have how the columns are going to be laid out on different screen sizes. Okay, so that's that. And then if you go back to our component, source, components, and then index, and this is where we're going to then import our grid styles. So if you go back to our index.css, we're going to import our variables and grids. Okay, then you need to make sure we are importing this index.scss, because if we don't import it, it's not going to bundle it into our build file. So we have to import it here. Paste it there. Okay. Now the next thing we need to do is basically we're going to come to our terminal and we're going to run pnpm dev and see what happens. If I run pnpm dev, as you can see that it's running wp scripts start, and it's kind of bundled stuff for you under the builds directory. Okay, index.js, index.asset.php. Now, what's actually happening? Well, since we are using workspaces, if you come to package.json, you can see that there is a command here that says dev, and it's going to recursively run this script into all the workspaces that you define here. For now, we have one. So when you go to Aquila, you go to package.json, there's a script here that says dev. And what it does is it runs our WordPress WP scripts command with start, which is basically running the development environment. When we do that, WordPress scripts, which is this package that we're using, basically is using Webpack behind the scenes, and it's bundling your files for you. But by default, it has a certain source directory and it has certain output directory, which is why if you see it doesn't have anything in the index.js and it doesn't have anything under index.assets.php. By the way, assets is basically, when it bundles stuff depending on, when you require. It's required by WordPress to let the WordPress know which JavaScript and CSS file your scripts depends on and what version they should be loaded with. So things like WP-element, WP-internationalization, WP-editor, all these dependencies. So when you're building blocks, you can include those dependencies to make sure they're loading. But of course, the WordPress scripts actually require your directory structure to be in a certain way. It's basically expecting a source folder and an index folder. So as you can see, we already have that. If I just do, let's say, console.log and hello, save it, go over here, you can see that this already bundled because this is already running, right? So as soon as you're making changes, it's picking up that change and it's bundling it as we go ahead and make changes and save our file. So this is not helping us because we want to keep our directory structure the way we want to, right? We'll have components, we'll have blocks, all those sort of things. So we don't want to use the default directory structure of that. We want to structure our project in a way that best suits for us. And for that, WordPress scripts allows you to basically extend the Webpack configurations by just creating your own Webpack file and then defining a bunch of things like where should be the source folder, how it should be bundled. What we want is that when we create this component directory, I should have a components and then grid and whole bunch of components that we create inside here. So, it should map this source components directory here. Everything shouldn't be like bundled over here. So it should pick up stuff from here and then build over there under the build folder. So we'll do that in the next video. We'll create a custom Webpack file and then we'll add the configurations. All right then, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.